Good afternoon. Welcome to Grace and Gavel, where truth meets compassion. My name is Buffy. I'm an almost 18-year criminal defense attorney that will be providing legal analysis where legal analysis is available. Today we're talking about the alibi problem, when innocence depends on a single hour. In theory, an alibi should be simple. If you weren't there, you couldn't have done it. But in practice, alibis are one of the most fragile defenses in criminal law and one of the most misunderstood. Today, we're going to talk about why having an alibi is not the same thing as proving an alibi, and why so many cases turn on something as small and as devastating as a single hour. For instance, I remember seeing an old Unsolved Mysteries case where this guy had actually multiple witnesses who had said that he was in the front yard of his house working on a car, and multiple witnesses saw him. I think maybe 5 or 6 or so, and they were willing to swear to that or give a sworn statement to that effect. But yet there was somebody else who said that they saw him at a grocery store, and apparently it was one of those like appeal episodes where they were saying, look, this guy is potentially going to be in prison for the rest of his life because somebody says that he was robbing this grocery store or something along those lines. I can't remember. It's been a while. So you think about the fact that like 1 hour could definitely change your life, especially if you're looking at a scenario where people are saying that you did something that you didn't do. So why alibis feel stronger than they are? To most people, an alibi feels definitive: a time, a place, a witness. But the law doesn't ask whether an alibi sounds reasonable. It asks whether it creates reasonable doubt, and that's a much higher bar. Another thing that I remember, another story that I remember from Unsolved Mysteries, was this lady whose husband was accused of killing her, and she was under like a tire of a car or something. And so what the police had actually done was they knew that they were at this party at a certain time. So he had probably 30 to 40 plus minutes to be able to get to the location that she had been at and to murder her and then to go back home. So oftentimes the police will actually map that out and try to figure out how long it takes. Then you have some criminals that I've seen on stories who have literally done things like making sure they're on camera at certain points, making sure that they get their receipts. They go to a particular gas station at a certain time, trying to make an alibi where they probably likely didn't have one. I remember seeing another case where this gentleman had actually murdered his wife, and she was actually in the trunk of the car. And he had actually had gone through like several of the toll booths, the automatic toll booths. And so he said, hey, we both went to, Miami, for instance. And they were like, yeah, but the thing that's crazy is like when he went through the toll booth, like there was no one in the passenger seat, so things like that are other cases that you think about where they try to kind of game the system, so to speak. And as you know, proof beyond a reasonable doubt is a very high bar for a reason, right? Because lest we convict someone who is actually not guilty, then have a guilty person go free, that's better than the alternative of convicting somebody who is not guilty, right? An alibi is also not affirmative proof of innocence, right? Because sometimes there's times and ability to kind of finagle things. It is a competing narrative that must withstand scrutiny. And obviously it's going to have scrutiny from the defense attorneys, from the prosecution, and there's going to be the defense attorney putting on evidence and probably a lot of witnesses indicating that this person has an alibi. There's going to be people probably saying, yes, I was with John, yes, I was with John. Yes, I was with John, and so it ultimately kind of becomes the battle of the lay people, right? Who was with who? What proof do you have? Do you have a receipt at this time? Do you have, is there a camera? Because, you look back now, there's a lot of cameras in different places. Gas stations have cameras. McDonald's probably has cameras, and so sometimes what can happen is if you're not able to get to that location before the cameras recycle and start over, then you might be at a loss, and that is lost evidence, which is actually devastating. And so there's no way to really prove, hey, look, I was at this gas station at such and such time, like at the video, if they've already erased it or deleted it. I mean, that's kind of an issue. And you think about it, that scrutiny is relentless, because ultimately, if they have reason to believe that someone did a crime, they're going to want to prosecute that, and they're going to want to prosecute it to the fullest extent of the law, right? So let's talk about the legal burden of an alibi. Contrary to popular belief, the defendant usually bears the burden of producing an alibi, not proving it beyond a reasonable doubt, but making it credible enough to matter. Prosecutors then test the credibility by asking, is the timeline consistent? Or was this just something that came up on the fly? Is the witness independent or personally invested? Meaning, is this his brother? Is this his dad? Is this his mom? Who is this person, and why are they sitting before us telling us that they saw him at such and such location? Does the account rely on memory? Does it rely on routine? Or is it just an assumption? I think he was there. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was there. Then you got to kind of question that. And then also, is there corroborating evidence? Meaning something that backs up what is being said. Or only testimony, right? So for instance, does he have a receipt? Does he have somebody who was with him? Does he always go to that particular gas station at 10 o'clock every morning? And was that where he was on that morning? An alibi rests on habit. I always do this on Tuesdays. I always go to this gas station Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Can be especially vulnerable because habit evidence is persuasive until it isn't, right? Let's talk about credibility versus truth. Here's where things can get uncomfortable. A witness can be truthful and be wrong. A witness can be truthful and still be wrong. Memory is not a recording, it's a reconstruction. Stress, time, and emotional attachment all distort recall. Courts don't ask, is this person lying? They ask, would a reasonable juror rely on this? That distinction is everything. Let's talk about the ethical tension for defense counsel. Defense attorneys face a difficult reality because, as I've said before, and I truly stand by this, as a defense attorney, the state holds all the cards. They hold the cards to offer a plea deal. They hold the cards to offer dismissal if they don't feel that their case is strong enough. And sometimes, even though they know that their case isn't strong enough, they are going to proceed with it. Maybe because of the family, maybe because of the high level of the crime. And if for some reason the jury hangs, they may have an ability then to decide to retry the case. Now that means a lot more money for the state, and that means a second bite at the apple. And I don't know how many of you actually are aware of this, but as a defense attorney, when you do your first trial, meaning the first trial on that particular issue, it is much easier because you have the ability to get the state by surprise. Your theories, your strategies are all new. They don't know what you're going to come up with, and they don't know what angle you're going to go. Which is why Casey Anthony's attorney, Jose Baez, at the time when he went into his defense about the swimming pool and the cover-up and all that, as well as the sexual abuse, That was like literally was out in left field for the prosecution. They were not prepared to have that response. And the jury responded to it and took it and ran with it. And she was found not guilty. Now, let's say that Casey Anthony's case went a lot differently, and she actually had been found guilty, right? And for some reason, there was some sort of mistrial and they had to retry her. That same strategy would not have been as novel. It would not have been as maybe sly or as innovative as it was when it came out the first time. Because often people who are able to get a not guilty on a first trial, if for whatever reason there is a retrial, like, they have the not guilty and then they do the retrial generally does not come out that way, because some of the strategies that caught the prosecution by surprise are no longer surprises. And generally the defendant ends up being found guilty that time, just because some of the strategies weren't as novel and the prosecution has an ability to kind of defend against them in a second trial or a retrial. And so the defense attorney has ethical obligations as well. So you have to keep your ethical obligations while providing zealous defense to your client. And zealous defense doesn't mean fabricating evidence. It doesn't mean coaching your client as to what to say. Have you all ever seen M for Murder? I remember when I was a new attorney, one of the presenters in the ethical course, because attorneys have to take ethical requirements as well, showed us a clip where this guy said that he was talking about whether or not he had murdered this person. And he was talking about how he had murdered this person for a reason. And his attorney was asking him the circumstances, like, was this gentleman hurting your wife? Was this guy? All sorts of scenarios he was talking about. And initially you can tell that his client doesn't fully know where he's going and why he's going where he's going. So of course he's like, no, he didn't do this. No, he didn't do that. No, he didn't do this. Well, then the attorney turns to him, and you would never do this as a real attorney, turns to him and says, is it possible that he sexually assaulted your wife? And the guy kind of looks at him, and he's like, because if you say that he sexually assaulted your wife and you were in fear for your life and she was in fear for her life and you were so angry that he had done this to you, that could potentially be a defense. And so he looks at him for a second and then he goes, yeah, that's exactly what happened. And he literally repeats almost like word for word, basically what that attorney told him to say. And I remember being in that room, and the presenter asked, how many people think that this is okay? And I remember so many people raising their hand, and I'm literally looking at them what? No, clearly the attorney was feeding him the information that he needed so that he would have a defense to why he killed the man. And the presenter, when I answered that question, was like, of course, guys, come on. You can't feed your clients. That's not what people do. That's not how things work. Right? The information has to come from your client. You can't create a defense for your client that doesn't exist. That's unethical. Right? And so ultimately, the attorney, the defense attorneys, and the prosecution, they owe an ethical obligation to the court, right? To be fair, upstanding, to follow the rules, the ethical rules, all the other rules, the legal rules, right? To be honest. And duties of zealous representation include researching, doing your job, giving your client a chance at a good defense and good representation. Knowing what you need to be doing. You need to be objecting at the appropriate times. You need to be maintaining you need to be ensuring that you're keeping all appealable issues open for them should things go sideways, because that is another element of zealous representation. Doing everything you can to make sure that your client has the best possible outcome. And also looking at the idea, the risk of anchoring the defense to a story that collapses under cross-examination can be scary. So then you have to also counsel on, I know we talked about this in a previous video, about self-incrimination, right? You want to kind of weigh some of that. Should your client testify, or are they a potential liability? And could they actually say something, maybe get upset at the prosecution and go off? And that could definitely turn the jury against them, right? So you got to think about all these little like side pieces going on around you. And you think about it, sometimes not using an alibi is safer than using a bad one. Because if you use a bad one, I was at my mom's having dinner, right? And then the defense attorney, the prosecution calls your mom, and your mom doesn't remember that you were having dinner with her. Then it seems like you just lied. You just perjured yourself in front of the court by saying you were having dinner with your mom, and you were not having dinner with your mom because your mom doesn't remember, right? That's a quick way to get a guilty verdict, right? Because you're not doing what you need to be doing. So in closing, alibis feel like certainty, but the law is not built on what feels certain. It's built on what survives doubt. And sometimes innocence depends not on whether someone was elsewhere, but on whether the system believes them when they say so. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope it gave you a little bit of insight into some of the things that attorneys are working on and kind of the pieces and how they fit somewhat, and more information on alibis. Well, thank you for tuning in, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, and hopefully you'll come back and see us again at Grace and Gavel, where truth meets compassion. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.